face, but his green eyes held the same sharp focus that had kept him alive into tour overseas. The radio crackled with news of record-breaking temperatures across California. August turned it off. He had driven through worse heat in desert convoys. But today, something else made sweat bead on his forehead. He had not heard from Kali in 3 weeks. 3 weeks of unanswered calls and texts that came back with short, careful responses. Just busy with house stuff. Dad, London's work has him traveling. More, the responses felt wrong. Callie had never been careful with words around him. She spoke her mind, argued back, laughed aloud at his bad jokes. These polite, distant messages came from a stranger. Oakage appeared as the road crested a hill. The town sprawled across a valley, its tree-lined streets and Spanish-style homes speaking of old money and older families. August had visited twice since Callie's wedding 2 years ago. Both times the Keats family had made it clear he belonged somewhere else, that he found the address burned into his memory and turned on a Maple Grove drive. The houses grew larger as he drove deeper into the neighborhood. Massive oaks cast shade over manicured lawns, and luxury cars sat in circular driveways like expensive jewelry in display cases. The Keats estate dominated the end of the street. 5 bedrooms, Callie had told him proudly after the wedding. A pool in the backyard, a 3-car garage, and enough space for the grandchildren Marjorie Keats mentioned at every family gathering. August parked his dusty pickup next to a spotless Mercedes and climbed out. The front door opened before he reached it. Marjorie Keats stood in the doorway, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, her cream-colored dress wrinkle-free despite the heat. She was 62, but carried herself like money could stop time. August. She did not step aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" "Came to see my daughter." He kept his voice level. "Surprise visit." Marjorie's smile looked practiced. "How thoughtful. She's out back." Needed some space to work on her projects. The way she said projects made it sound like a character flaw. "I'll go find her." Of course, Marjorie stepped back, but not quite enough. August had to brush past her to enter. She's been keeping busy, very independent. The house's air conditioning hit him like a cold wave. August glanced around the marble entryway, past the crystal chandelier to the sweeping staircase. Family photos lined the walls, but he noticed something missing. The wedding photos that had included him and Collie were gone. Only pictures of Landon and his parents remained. "Beautiful home," he said. "Thank you. We've worked hard to maintain certain standards." Marjorie clasped her hands in front of her. "Silas is in his study. If you'd like to say hello, maybe later." "I'll go find Collie first. She's in the garden shed." "You can go through the kitchen." August walked through the house, his boots silent on the polished floors. The kitchen looked like something from a magazine. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Every surface gleamed. Fresh flowers sat in crystal vases. The refrigerator was stocked with expensive imported water and organic produce. French doors led to a covered patio overlooking the backyard. He stepped outside and stopped. The temperature hit him like a physical force, the kind of heat that made breathing feel like work. His shirt stuck to his back within seconds, sweat immediately beading on his forehead. The contrast was stark and deliberate. The covered patio offered blessed shade, comfortable outdoor furniture, arranged around a ceiling fan that moved cool air in lazy circles. The pool sparkled blue and inviting, surrounded by cushion lounge chairs and a fully equipped bar set up under a pergola. Umbrellas provided additional shade. Ice buckets sat ready for cold drinks, every comfort money could buy. But his eyes went to the far corner of the yard where a small wooden structure sat baking in the direct sun. No shade trees nearby. No awning or cover, no protection from the relentless August heat that turned the San Joaquin Valley into an oven. The contrast couldn't have been more intentional. August crossed the manicured lawn. His boots crunching on grass turned brittle by the heat. The closer he got to the shed, the more wrong everything felt. No windows faced the house, no shade trees nearby. The structure looked designed to trap heat, not provide comfort. He knocked on the door. Callie, Dad. Her voice came through the thin wood, shocked and thick with emotion. The door opened and August whirled tilted. His daughter stood before him, her dark hair damp with sweat, her face flushed red from the heat. She wore a tank top and shorts, both wrinkled from sleeping in them. Behind her, he could see a narrow cot pushed against one wall, a plastic storage bin overflowing with clothes, and a small fan that moved hot air around the cramped space. What the hell is this? August stepped inside and immediately wanted to step back out. The heat pressed against him like a living thing. A thermometer nailed to the wall read 100 for. Dad, you can't be here. Callie glanced past him toward the house. Marjorie doesn't allow. Doesn't allow what? August grabbed the thermometer and stared at the red line. Jesus Christ, Callie, how long have you been living in here? She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Since Landon left for his contract, 3 months now, 3 months. August felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd had when enemy fire started, up in Iraq. Explain it to me. Callie sat heavily on the cot. The springs creaked under her weight, a sound that spoke of cheap construction and temporary solutions. There's a rule. No non-blood family in the house when London's not here. Marjorie made it clear the day after he left. You're his wife. I'm not a Keats. Callie's voice cracked with exhaustion and something deeper. Shame. Marjorie says the house has standards. Blood family only when the head of household is absent. August knelt beside the cot studying his daughter's face. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. Her lips looked dry and cracked despite the water bottle beside her. Her skin had the sallow look of someone who hadn't seen enough sunlight, hadn't eaten enough good food, hadn't slept enough restful hours. Have you been eating? She lets me use the kitchen in the mornings. Before they wake up, Callie pulled the water bottle from beside the cot and took a small sip, rationing it like someone who understood scarcity. I have to be out before 7. That's when Marjorie has her coffee. And at night, she locks the house at 10 o'clock, says it's for security. Callie's laugh was bitter and empty. Security from what? From me. August stood and walked to the single window. It faced away from the house toward the back fence where tall wooden slats blocked any view from neighboring properties. Perfect isolation. No one could see the shed from the main house or the street. No witnesses to whatever happened here. He turned back to his daughter and saw her differently now. Not just hot and uncomfortable, but systematically broken down. Isolated, controlled, humiliated in small ways that added up to something larger and more devastating. Pack your things. Right now? Dad, I can't just leave. Landon will be back in 2 months. This is his home, his family. She gestured helplessly at the shed around them. This is temporary. This isn't temporary. This is abuse. August pulled the plastic bin toward the cot, his movement sharp with controlled anger. Get your clothes. We're leaving. You don't understand. Callie stood and began pacing in the tiny space, 3 steps in each direction. Marjorie has influence in this town. She knows everyone who matters. If I cause problems, if I make waves, it'll hurt London's business when he gets back. It'll hurt his future. August stopped packing and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her, the confident young woman who had graduated, college with honors, who had negotiated her own job contracts, who had never backed down from a fight in her life, stood hunched in a sweltering shed because someone told her she wasn't good enough. Someone had convinced her that her suffering was necessary to protect other people's comfort. Callie, his voice was quiet now, the tone he'd used when she was small and needed to understand something important. Do you remember what I taught you about bullies? She nodded slowly, her eyes focusing on memories from childhood. You stand up to them. What else? You don't let them win. You don't give them what they want. And what do you do if someone hurts your family? Callie met his eyes for the first time since he'd arrived. Something stirred there. A spark of the fighter he'd raised. You make them pay for it. August handed her the water bottle. Drink all of that. Then pack everything you want to keep. We're going to have a conversation with your in-laws. Dad, no more discussion, no more negotiation, no more being reasonable with unreasonable people. August moved to the door and paused. They declared war on my daughter. Now they get to find out what that costs. They walked back to the house together, Callie carrying a small duffel bag with her belongings. August had left a plastic bin of clothes in the shed. He wanted the Keats family to see exactly what they had reduced his daughter to. No pretense, no hiding the evidence. Let them look at the storage bin and the sweat-stained clothes and explain how that represented their family values. The air conditioning felt arctic after the heat of the shed. August's shirt was soaked through and sweat dripped from his forehead despite the short walk. He could only imagine what 3 months of that heat had done to Callie's body, and mind that he found Silas Keats in the kitchen, leaning against the granite counter with a crystal glass in his hand. Bourbon from the smell, good bourbon probably aged longer than some of August's employees had been alive. At 65, Silas carried the soft look of a man who had never missed a meal or worked with his hands. His polo shirt was crisp white, his khaki pants perfectly creased, his loafers polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him spoke of money and leisure and the assumption that problems could be solved by other people. Marjorie stood beside her husband, arms folded across her chest. She looked at Callie like something unpleasant had been tracked in on someone's shoes. Her expression was carefully controlled, but August caught the flash of annoyance in her eyes. She hadn't expected this confrontation, hadn't prepared for it. August Silas took a sip of bourbon, the gesture deliberately casual. Marjorie said, "You'd stopped by, drink. No thanks." August stepped into the kitchen. Callie behind him. "We need to talk, of course." Always happy to chat with family, Silas's tone suggested otherwise. His smile was practiced, empty, the kind wealthy people used on service workers and other inconveniences. "Is that what you call this?" August gestured toward Callie, family. Marjorie's chin lifted, her back straightening with aristocratic pride. "We've provided Callie with accommodation appropriate to her status. The shed is perfectly adequate for temporary housing." Temporary. August felt his control slipping. The calm he maintained since finding Callie beginning to crack. 3 months in a 100 oven is temporary. "Our house," Silas said, his voice harder now, the friendly facade dropping away. "Our rules." Callie understood the arrangement. When Landon left, what arrangement? August stepped closer to Silas, close enough to smell the expensive bourbon on his breath. "The arrangement where you treat my daughter like hired help. Where you lock her out of the house at night like a stray dog." "We maintain certain standards," Marjorie said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her pronouncements accepted without question. "Blood family has priority in our home. Callie can return to the main house when Landon comes back." August turned to face her fully. Marjorie was tall for a woman, but August had 6 in on her, and 40 pounds of muscle built over decades of physical work. He moved close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the controlled fury burning there. "What you've done isn't just cruel," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's stupid, and I'm going to make sure you regret it." Marjorie blinked, but held her ground, though he noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Silas sat down, his glass hard enough to ring against the granite. Ice cubes rattled against crystal. Now see here, Monroe. You can't come into our home and intimidate. Your home. August cut him off, his voice rising for the first time. You mean the home where you put my daughter in a shed like a dog, where you make her beg for kitchen privileges? He looked back at Marjorie, his stare unwavering where you decided she's not good enough to breathe the same air as you. Callie could have made other arrangements, Marjorie said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. She chose to stay. No one forced her. She stayed because she loves your son. Because she thought family meant something to you people. August picked up Callie's duffel bag, the weight of a pathetic evidence of how little she'd been allowed to keep. She was wrong. Silas straightened to his full height, which still left him looking up at August. His face was flushed now, whether from anger or bourbon. You're making a mistake here. We have standing in this community. Friends influence. People who matter listen to us. August smiled, and both Silas and Marjorie took a step back. It was not a friendly expression. It was the smile of a man who had faced down armed enemies and lived to tell about it. Good, he said. That'll make this more interesting. He turned to Callie, who had been silent through the confrontation, watching her in-laws reveal their true nature with growing horror and dawning understanding. Ready, she nodded, her face pale but determined. Ready, excellent. August walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at the Keats family. We'll be in touch real soon. Behind them, he heard Marjorie's voice sharp with anger and the first hint of fear. Don't think this is over, Monroe. August paused at the front door and called back, his voice carrying through the marble entryway with military precision. Lady, it hasn't even started. August House in Riverside sat on a quiet street lined with modest homes and mature trees. The two-bedroom ranch style looked small after the Keats estate, but it was clean and comfortable, and most importantly, it belonged to him. No rules about who could sleep where, no hierarchies based on bloodlines, just honest work rewarded with honest comfort that he cranked the air conditioning to 68 and made a picture of iced tea while Callie showered. He could hear the water running for 20 minutes, and he didn't begrudge her a second of it. When you've been denied basic comforts for 3 months, you appreciated them differently. She emerged from the bathroom looking like a different person. Her hair was clean and properly dried. Her skin had lost the flush of constant heat exposure. She wore clothes that actually fit, jeans and a t-shirt that weren't wrinkled from sleeping in them. Most importantly, the haunted look in her eyes had begun to fade. Sit, he said, handing her a tall glass of tea with extra ice. Tell me everything. Callie settled in the kitchen chair where she'd eaten breakfast before school for 12 years. The same wooden table, the same blue placemats, the same view of the backyard vegetable garden. Home in every sense that mattered. Where do I start? The beginning. When did this start? She sipped the tea and closed her eyes briefly, like someone savoring water after crossing a desert. It started before the wedding. Really little comments. Marjorie would ask when I was going to learn to cook properly. Or she'd mention that Londone's ex-girlfriend came from a good family with old money connections. Nothing big enough to complain about. August felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. What about Landon? He never heard most of it. Marjorie was careful. She'd wait until he was out of the room, or she'd phrase things as helpful suggestions. Perhaps you'd like to take some cooking classes, dear. The wives in our circle all know their way around a proper kitchen. Callie's voice took on Marjorie's honey tone, always with that smile. And you never told me. Callie met his eyes and he saw the guilt there? Dad, you sacrificed everything to raise me after Mom died. You worked 2 jobs to put me through college. You gave up dating, gave up your own social life, gave up any chance at happiness so I could have opportunities. I wasn't going to burden you with my problems. August reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin was soft now, no longer rough from the heat and dehydration. Your problems are my problems, always. That's what family means. I know, but I thought I could handle it. I thought once Landon and I had our own place, it would get better. But you never got your own place. Landon's business was struggling. He's an engineer, but he was working for a small firm that barely made payroll some months. The Keats offered to let us live with them temporarily, save money, get on our feet. Callie pulled her hand free and wrapped both around her glass. Marjorie made it clear the house came with conditions. Respect for family hierarchy, proper behavior, contributing a household expenses even though we weren't paying rent. How much were you contributing? $1,800 a month. Most of my paycheck. Callie's voice grew quiet. Marjorie said it was only fair since we were using their utilities and eating their food. She presented it as teaching us financial responsibility. August bit back the words he wanted to say. His daughter needed to tell this story, not hear's anger. But $1,800 a month was highway robbery for people living under your roof and calling you family. What happened when Landon left? His company offered him a 6-month contract in Southeast Asia. Good money. Chance for advancement. We talked about it and I encouraged him to take it. The money would let us finally get our own place when he came back. Callie's voice grew quieter. The day after he left, Marjorie sat me down for what she called a conversation about new house rules, the blood family rule, among others. No guests without permission. Kitchen access restricted to designated hours. No use of the pool or patio unless specifically invited. No television in the main living areas during family time. Callie stood and walked to the window. In the shed rule, non-blood family could use the guest accommodation when the main house was occupied by blood family only. The shed isn't guest accommodation. It's a storage building. Marjorie called it rustic charm. Said it would teach me self-reliance and help me appreciate the finer things in life. Callie leaned against the window frame. She made it sound like a character-building exercise. August joined her at the window. His backyard was small but green with tomatoes and peppers growing in neat rows. Simple, honest, nothing like the manicured perfection of the Keat, but it was real. Did you try to contact Landon? Every week at first, but Marjorie handles the family communications. She has the main number forwarded to her phone when Landon's overseas. She filters emails through the family account, takes messages when he calls. Callie's hands clenched into fists. Why did talk to him? She was always nearby, hovering, listening. I couldn't explain without sounding like I was attacking his family, so you suffered in silence. I thought I could tough it out. 2 more months and Landon would be home. We'd figure out our own place and this would all be behind us. She turned from the window. I convinced myself it was temporary. That would make our marriage stronger somehow. August studied his daughter's profile. Even now, after everything, she was making excuses for people who had treated her like garbage. That stopped today, Callie. What Marjorie and Silas did to you isn't just wrong. In some states, it's criminal. Unsafe living conditions, economic abuse, emotional manipulation. He turned to face her fully. They took advantage of your love for Landon to control and humiliate you. I know, her voice was small. I just didn't know what to do about it. Now you do. We're going to destroy them. Callie turned from the window surprised. Dad, not legally, not physically, but they hurt my daughter and they're going to pay for it. August walked back to the table and sat down. This isn't about getting you out of that shed. You're safe now. This is about making sure they never have the power to hurt anyone else the way they hurt you. What are you going to do? August smiled, and for the first time since finding her in that shed, it was a genuinely happy expression. I'm going to war, and unlike them, I actually know how to fight one. August started his investigation the next morning. He drove back to Oakage with a small notebook and a plan. First stop, the neighbors. Donna Briggs lived in the house directly across from the Keith estate. She was in her 70s with iron gray hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She answered the door wearing a house dress and an expression of curiosity. "You're Callie's father," she said before August could introduce himself. "I recognized you from the wedding photos." She showed me. "Yes, ma'am, August Monroe." He held out his hand. "I was hoping to ask you a few questions about my daughter's living situation." Donna glanced toward the Keats house and stepped back to let him in. Come in, come in. Coffee." Her living room was comfortable and lived in, the opposite of the Keats showplace. Family photos covered every surface and a well-worn Bible set open on the side table. "I've been worried about that." "Girl," Donna said, returning with 2 cups of coffee. "Saw her faint in the yard about 6 weeks ago, right there by the fence. I went over to check on her, but Marjorie came out and said Callie was fine, just a little tired from yard work." Yard work in 100 heat. That's what I thought. I offered to bring her some lemonade, but Marjorie said that wouldn't be necessary. Very polite about it, but firm. Donna sat across from August. "I didn't see much of Callie after that. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of her early in the morning heading to her car." "Did you know she was living in the shed?" Donna's cup rattled against the saucer. "The garden shed, that little building out back." August nodded. "Dear Lord, in this heat." Donna sat down her coffee with shaking hands. "I knew something wasn't right." Marjorie kept saying Callie preferred her privacy, but what kind of privacy is that? "The kind where no one can see what's being done to you." Donna stood and walked to her front window. "I should have done something, should have knocked on that door and demanded to know what was going on." "You couldn't have known. They were careful to hide it, but I suspected. My grandmother used to say, when something feels wrong, it usually is." Donna turned back to August. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure this never happens again." "But I need witnesses, people who saw things that didn't seem right." "You got one right here. I'll swear in court if I have to." August's second stop was Precision HVAC, a small company on the outskirts of town. The owner, Trey Hudson, was a stocky man in his 40s with calloused hands and honest eyes. He remembered the Keats job immediately. "Strange service call I ever had," Trey said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Mrs. Keats called, said she needed me to check the ventilation in their garden shed. Make sure it was adequate for extended occupancy." Extended occupancy, that's what she said. When I got out there and looked at the building, I knew right away there was a problem. No real ventilation system, just one small window and gaps in the wood siding. I told her the space wasn't suitable for anything but storage. August pulled out his notebook. "What did she say?" "She said it was temporary. Asked if I could install a small unit to make it more comfortable. I gave her a quote, but she never called back." Trey shook his head. "I drove past there a few weeks later and saw someone had put an old box fan in the window. Might as well have tried to cool the place with a feather. Would you be willing to put that in writing?" "Absolutely. I keep detailed notes on all my jobs." "Dates, times, what was discussed?" Trey walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. "Here it is. June 15th, cost estimate for shed cooling system. I noted that the space was unsuitable for occupancy without major modifications." August 3rd stop was the county sheriff's office. Deputy Lane Corcoran was waiting for him in the parking lot just as they'd arranged over the phone. Lane was younger than August by 5 years, but they'd served together in Iraq and maintained the kind of friendship forged under fire. He was tall and lean with graying hair, cut military short, and the steady demeanor of a man who'd seen enough trouble to handle it calmly. "Hell of a thing," Lane said after August explained the situation. "Legally, it's tricky. Adult chose to stay. No physical violence. Technically, she had shelter and food access, but forced isolation. economic control, unsafe living conditions that adds up to abuse in my book. Problem is proving intent and getting it to stick. Lane leaned against his patrol car. You'd have better luck going after them socially. People like the Keats, reputation is everything. What do you know about them? Old family, old money. Silas inherited the family investment business. Mostly manages money for other wealthy families in the area. Marjorie chairs half the charity boards in town. Lane pulled out his own notebook. They're respected but not necessarily liked. Word is they look down on anyone who doesn't meet their standards. What kind of standards? The kind that change depending on who's applying. I've heard rumors over the years. Business deals that went bad for people who crossed them? Social exclusion for families that didn't fit in. Lane tapped his pen against the notebook. Nothing illegal, but patterns of behavior that suggest your daughter isn't their first victim. August felt pieces of a plan forming in his mind. What would it take to damage that reputation? Evidence, witnesses, and the right forum to present it all. Lane smiled grimly. Lucky for you. I know exactly the right forum. The Oakage Heritage Committee met the third Thursday of every month in the Town Hall's main conference room. August sat in the back row studying the agenda packet he'd picked up at the door. Item 7 caught his attention. Keats Family Estate Heritage Grant Application. The committee consisted of 7 members, all prominent local citizens with the kind of influence that mattered in a small town. They were reviewing applications for state heritage grants, money available to preserve and restore historically significant properties. The Keats application requested $50,000 in funding to convert part of their property into a luxury guest house while maintaining its historical character. August read through the requirements carefully. Financial stability. The Keats had that community standing. They had that too. Proof of proper property maintenance. Extensive documentation provided. And most importantly, evidence of exemplary family and residential standards sworn statements from character references. Character references who had no idea what went on behind closed doors that he spent the rest of the week building his case like the military operation it was. Callie provided a detailed written statement about her treatment. Every humiliation documented with dates and specifics. Donna Briggs agreed to document everything she'd witnessed, signing a sworn affidavit that described the fainting incident and her subsequent concerns. Trey Hudson prepared a formal report on the shed's condition, complete with photographs and professional recommendations that had been ignored. Deputy Corcoran helped August understand which laws might have been violated and what evidence would be most compelling in a public forum. More importantly, he provided credibility. When a sworn law enforcement officer supported your claims, people listened. August also made some discreet inquiries around town. The Keats had enemies, people who had been on the wrong side of their judgment over the years. A restaurant owner whose family had been excluded from the country club after a minor social foul. A contractor who'd been blacklisted after a dispute over payment that had cost him 3 months of work. A young teacher who'd been passed over for promotion after crossing Marjorie on a school board issue involving funding for special needs children. None of them would speak publicly against the Keats family directly. That would be social suicide in a town where reputation mattered more than truth, but they all listened with great interest when August explained what had happened to Collie. And they all promised to be at the Heritage Committee meeting where began to spread through the networks that existed in every small town. Whispers in grocery store aisles, conversations over coffee at the diner, speculation about what really went on behind the perfect facade. Of the Keats, Marjorie began to notice the change almost immediately. Friends who usually called daily went silent. Lunch invitations were declined with vague excuses about being busy or feeling under the weather. At the country club, conversation stopped when she entered a room, resuming in hushed tones after she passed. The very subtle but unmistakable signs that the social winds were shifting. August watched from a distance as the Keats' social armor began to crack, but he wasn't finished. He wanted them to feel the full weight of exposure, the helplessness of being judged by people who mattered to them. He wanted them to experience the isolation and humiliation they had inflicted on his daughter. The night before the Heritage Committee meeting, August sat with Collie on his back porch. The temperature had finally dropped below 90, and a slight breeze made the evening almost comfortable. She looked healthier now, the pour of heat exhaustion replaced by natural color. The stress lines around her eyes beginning to fade. "Are you sure about this?" Callie asked, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and fear. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Landon might never forgive me for destroying his family's reputation. If Landon can't see the truth about his parents after everything they've done to you, then he's not the man you thought you married." August sipped his iced tea and watched fireflies blink in the darkness, but I think he's better than that. I think when he sees the evidence, when he understands what they put you through, he'll be as angry as I am. What if the committee doesn't care? What if they just see it as a family dispute? Then we'll find another way. But people like the Keats understand one thing above all else: public humiliation. Tomorrow, in front of everyone who matters in this town, they're going to be exposed for exactly what they are. Callie was quiet for a long moment, listening to the evening sounds of his neighborhood. Kids playing in backyards, dogs barking, normal families living normal lives without cruelty or manipulation. I keep thinking about that shed, how small it was, how hot, how alone I felt. You're not alone anymore. I know, but there might be others. Other daughters-in-law, other people they have power over. Other women trapped the way I was trapped. August turned to look at his daughter. Even after everything she'd been through, she was thinking about others who might need protection. He'd raised her right. "That's exactly why we're doing this," he said. "Not just for you, for anyone else who might end up in their crosshairs." The town hall parking lot was full when August and Callie arrived the next evening. Heritage Committee meetings usually drew a dozen interested citizens, mostly retirees with time on their hands and opinions about local history. Tonight, the room was packed with nearly 60 people. Word had spread that something significant was going to happen, and Oakage turned out to see the show. August had called ahead to reserve time for public comment. He carried a manila folder containing photographs, witness statements, medical records, and documented evidence of everything the Keats had done to Collie. As they took seats in the front row, he noticed Marjorie and Silas enter through the back door, their faces carefully composed, but their eyes weary. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how wrong. The war in August's mind had been building for days. Tonight, it would finally begin. Committee Chairman Walter Hensley called the meeting to order at 7 o'clock sharp. He was a distinguished man in his 70s with white hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to respect. The Keats had cultivated his friendship for years. "We have an unusually full agenda tonight," Hensley announced, "and what appears to be an unusually large audience. We'll proceed with regular business first, then move to public comment." August sat perfectly still as the committee worked through routine matters. Beside him, Callie fidgeted with the strap of her purse. Behind them, he could feel the weight of attention from the packed room. Everyone knew something was coming. Item 7. Hensley announced Heritage Grant application from the Keats family estate. Marjorie rose from her seat in the back and walked to the podium. She wore a navy blue dress and pearls, her silver hair perfect despite the evening heat. She looked like exactly what she was: old money, old family, old power. "Good evening, Walter, committee members." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. "The Keith family is honored to present our application for heritage designation and grant funding." She outlined their proposal with practiced ease. Convert the carriage house into luxury guest accommodations. Restore the main house to its original 1920s grandeur. create a showcase that would bring tourists and prestige to Oakage. The Keats family has been part of this community for 4 generations. Marjorie concluded, "We've maintained the highest standards of property care and family values. This grant will allow us to share our heritage with visitors while preserving it for future generations." Polite applause filled the room. Committee members nodded approvingly. Everything was proceeding exactly as the Keats expected. "Thank you, Marjorie," Hensley said. "Are there any questions for the applicant?" Committee member Sarah Phillips raised her hand. "The application mentions exemplary residential standards. Can you elaborate on what that means?" Of course, Marjorie's smile never wavered. "We maintain our property according to historical preservation guidelines. We follow proper protocols for family housing arrangements. We ensure that all residents of the estate understand and respect the traditions that make our home special." August felt Collie tense beside him. The words were carefully chosen, but they carried the weight of everything she'd endured. "Any other questions?" Hensley asked. When none came, he moved to the next item. "The committee will now hear public comment on any matter of community interest." August stood and walked to the podium. The room fell silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet as he set his manila folder on the lectern and opened it. "My name is August Monroe. I'm here to talk about the Keats family's application for heritage funding." He looked directly at Marjorie, who sat frozen in her chair, specifically about their claim of exemplary residential standards. He pulled out the first photograph. It showed the interior of the garden shed, the narrow cot, the plastic storage bin, the thermometer reading 104. "This is where the Keats family housed my daughter for 3 months while her husband was overseas in a storage shed in 100 heat with no proper ventilation and no access to the main house." Gasps rose from the audience. Committee members leaned forward in their chairs. Marjorie started to stand, but Silas pulled her back down. August continued, his voice calm and measured. "My daughter is Callie Monroe Keats, married to Landon Keats for 2 years. When Landon left for a work assignment, his parents implemented what they called the blood family rule. Non-blood family members were not permitted in the main house." He pulled out Donna Briggs's statement and read key passages. The witnessed fainting episode, the refusal of help, the obvious signs of heat exhaustion. Mrs. Donna Briggs will testify that she offered assistance to my daughter on multiple occasions only to be turned away by Marjorie Keats, who claimed everything was fine. Next came Trey Hudson's report. August read the HVAC contractor's professional assessment that the shed was unsuitable for human occupancy. The request to make it livable, the rejected quote. Despite being told by a licensed contractor that the space was dangerous, the Keats family forced my daughter to remain there for 3 months. They controlled her access to food, water, and basic sanitation. They isolated her from potential help by positioning the shed out of sight from neighbors in the street. Walter Hensley found his voice. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Monroe. Do you have evidence to support them?" August pulled out Callie's medical records from her visit to the emergency room 2 weeks earlier. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, stress-related symptoms. He read the doctor's notes about prolonged exposure to dangerous temperatures. "This is my daughter," he said, holding up a photograph taken the day he found her. Callie's face was flushed and drawn, her clothes soaked with sweat. This is what exemplary residential standards looked like for a young woman whose only crime was not being born into the right family. The room erupted. Voices rose in shock and anger. Committee members conferred in urgent whispers. Marjorie finally stood, her face pale but defiant. "This is completely one-sided," she called out. "We provided accommodation appropriate to the circumstances." Callie was free to make other arrangements at any time. With what money? August shot back. "After you took most of her paycheck for household expenses, after you isolated her from anyone who might have helped," Silas rose beside his wife. This is harassment. You can't prove any of this constitutes abuse. Deputy Lane Corcoran stood from his seat in the middle of the room. His uniform and badge commanded immediate attention. Actually, they can, he said. I've reviewed the evidence Mr. Monroe has gathered. Forced isolation, economic control, unsafe living conditions, and emotional manipulation constitute a pattern of abuse under California law. The fact that the victim was an adult who stayed voluntarily doesn't change the criminal nature of the behavior. The room fell silent again. Committee Chairman Hensley looked stunned. Are you saying charges could be filed? He asked. I'm saying any prosecutor would take a hard look at this case, Lane replied, especially with the documented evidence and witness statements. Marjorie's careful composure finally cracked. She's too sensitive. We provided shelter and food. We asked for reasonable contribution to household expenses. If she couldn't handle the arrangement, she should have left. Left and gone where? Callie stood from her seat, her voice carrying through the silent room. You made sure I had no money saved. You intercepted communications with my husband. You convinced me that causing problems would hurt his career. She faced the committee directly. You made me believe I deserved to live like an animal. The committee members exchanged glances loaded with meaning. Sarah Phillips spoke first. In light of these allegations, I move that we table the Keats application pending a thorough investigation of the claims made tonight. Seconded came from another member. All in favor, Hensley asked. 7 hands rose in unison. The application is tabled indefinitely, Hensley announced. Furthermore, this matter will be referred to the appropriate county authorities for review. Marjorie stood trembling with rage. This is a travesty. We've served this community for generations. Our family built half this town. Your family, August said, closing his folder, just lost its reputation in about 20 minutes. Land and Keats returned from Southeast Asia a week later to find his world turned upside down. August met him at the airport alone. Callie had wanted to come, but August convinced her that this conversation needed to happen between the men first. Landon looked tired from the long flight, but his face showed genuine confusion when he saw August instead of his parents waiting at the arrival gate. August, where's Callie? Where are my parents? Your wife is safe at my house. Your parents are dealing with some legal issues. August picked up London's largest suitcase. We need to talk. They drove to a coffee shop near the airport. August spread the same documents across the table that he'd presented to the Heritage Committee. Photos, statements, medical records. He watched London's face change as he absorbed the evidence. This can't be right, Landon said, but his voice lacked conviction. My mother wouldn't do this. There has to be some explanation. There is an explanation. Your parents are bullies who use your absence to torture my daughter. Landon stared at the photograph of the shed's interior. She was living in there. All this time when I called, she said she was fine. She said everything was good because your mother was listening to every conversation because your wife was afraid that telling the truth would hurt your career. August leaned forward. Your parents counted on her love for you to keep her quiet. I need to hear this from Callie. You will, but first, you need to understand something. Your parents didn't just mistreat my daughter. They broke the law. Deputy Corcoran is building a case that could result in criminal charges. Wandon's hand shook as he set down the medical report. Heat exhaustion. Jesus Christ. She could have died. Yes, she could have. Why didn't she tell me in our video calls, in her messages? Because she loves you. Because she thought she could endure anything for 3 months if it meant protecting your relationship with your family. August gathered the documents. She was wrong, but her motives were pure. They drove to Riverside in silence. Callie was waiting on the front porch, and August watched 24 months of marriage play out in 30 seconds as Landon saw his wife clearly for the first time since his return. The weight loss, the stress lines around her eyes, the way she held herself like someone expecting a blow. Landon broke into a run before he reached the porch steps. August gave them an hour alone before rejoining them in the living room. Callie sat curled against Landon's side, his arm tight around her shoulders. Both have been crying. "I've called a lawyer," Landon said without preamble. "I'm filing for divorce." August raised an eyebrow from Callie. "From my parents' legal separation from their finances, their business, their influence." Landon's voice was steady now. "I'm also giving a sworn statement to Deputy Corcoran supporting any criminal charges he wants to file." "Landon, you don't have to choose sides," Callie said softly. "Yes, I do. I already have." He turned to face her fully. "They hurt you. They could have killed you. And they did it because they thought their name and their money made them untouchable. What about your trust fund? Your inheritance? I don't want it. I don't want anything that comes from people who would treat you like they did." Landon looked at August. "I'm hoping you'll help me find a job with your construction company. I know it's not much, but I need to start over. We need to start over." August studied the young man he'd never fully trusted. Landon was soft, educated, raised with advantages August had never known. But the pain in his eyes was real, and his anger at his parents was genuine. "Can you swing a hammer? I can learn. Can you show up every day, even when you're tired and sore and would rather be somewhere else?" "Yes, sir." August nodded. "Then, we'll see what you're made of." The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Landon had no desire to drag out the legal battle. He signed away his claim to the family estate, the investment accounts, and the business holdings that have been promised to him since childhood. In return, he demanded that his parents sign a written acknowledgement of their treatment of Callie and a formal apology. When they refused, he made the divorce papers public, including detailed allegations about their abuse. The scandal destroyed what remained of the Keats family's reputation. Silas lost 3 major investment clients within a month. Marjorie was quietly removed from 2 charity boards. Their application for membership at an exclusive resort community in Florida was rejected without explanation. 6 months later, August sat on his back porch reading the Sunday paper. The Oakage Weekly ran a small item in the community section that made him smile. "Local charity gala falls short of expectations." Read the headline. The article described Marjorie Keats's attempt to host a fundraising dinner for the Historical Society. Only 18 people attended an event planned for 60. The proceeds barely covered the cost of catering. The event organizers expressed disappointment in the community response. The article noted diplomatically. What it didn't say was that most of Oakage society had decided the Keats family was too toxic to associate with. Callie and Landon had moved into a small apartment across town. Landon worked construction for August Company, learning to use his hands for the first time in his life. He was slow and clumsy at first, but he showed up every day and never complained. The other crews were beginning to accept him. Callie had taken a job as a bookkeeper for a local nonprofit. The pay was modest, but she came home every day excited about the work. She was helping families navigate social services, ensuring they got the support they needed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that she was protecting vulnerable people from exactly the kind of treatment she'd endured. August folded the newspaper and walked to his garage. He'd been working on a project for the past month, something he'd wanted to do since the night he brought Callie home from that sweltering shed. The storage building in his backyard was small, about the same size as the Keith's garden shed, but this one had proper insulation, electricity, air conditioning, and plumbing. Comfortable furniture, good lighting, and a mini kitchen. He'd build it as a guest house, but also as a reminder. The sign above the door read Monroe House, Safe Harbor. If Callie ever encountered someone else trapped in an abusive situation, they'd have a place to go. No questions asked, no rent required, just safety and time to figure out their next move. Deputy Corcoran had filed charges against the Keats family 3 months earlier. reckless endangerment, elder abuse statutes applied to vulnerable adults, and conspiracy to commit emotional abuse. The case was working its way through the system slowly, but Corcoran was confident about the outcome. Jury S going to take one look at those pictures of the shed and hear Callie's testimony, and the Keats are done. He told August, even if they avoid jail time, they'll have criminal records. That matters to people like them. As evening approached, Callie and Landon arrived for their weekly family dinner. It had become a tradition, this gathering around August's kitchen table. Simple food, honest conversation, and the easy comfort of people who understood each other. How was work this week? August asked Landon as they finished eating. Good. Frank let me handle the electrical rough-in on the Morrison house, so I didn't embarrass myself too badly. Landon flexed his callous hands with obvious pride. It's strange coming home exhausted, but feeling like I actually accomplished something. That's the difference between working with your hands and pushing paper around. August said, one of them builds something real. Callie reached across the table and took both men's hands. I got a call from the legal aid office today. They want me to speak at a conference about financial abuse in domestic relationships. Share my story with social workers and law enforcement. You go and do it, August asked. I think so, if it helps one person recognize the signs or gives someone the courage to get out. She squeezed their hands. I keep thinking about other women who might be going through what I went through, maybe worse. August looked at his daughter and felt the familiar surge of pride that had carried him through 20 years of single parenthood. She'd been broken by the Keats family's cruelty, but she hadn't stayed broken. She'd used the experience to make herself stronger and more compassionate. Your mother would be proud of you, he said quietly. After Callie and Landon left, August walked to the Monroe house and turned on the lights. The comfortable space glowed warmly in the evening darkness. He'd never advertised its existence, but word was spreading through the networks that helped vulnerable people. 3 women had stayed there so far, each one taking time to rebuild their lives and plan their escape from bad situations that he thought about the Keats family in their big empty house, surrounded by all their fine things and their damaged reputation. They'd had everything and thrown it away, because they couldn't resist the urge to hurt someone they saw as beneath them. Justice wasn't always swift, but it was thorough. August had learned that lesson in the army, and he'd applied it here. You don't win wars with single battles. You win them by being more patient and more determined than your enemy. His phone buzzed with a text message from Callie. Thanks for dinner, Dad. Thanks for everything. Love you. August smiled and typed back. Love you too, sweetheart. Sleep well. He turned off the lights in Monroe House and walked back to his own porch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities to build something worthwhile. But tonight, justice had been served, family have been protected, and the good guys at We in his book. That was.